Representative of El Salvador. I call now on the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my delegation took note of the report of the Secretary General on the work of the organization in document A/73/1. My delegation welcomes, in principle, the information contained in the report on the challenges facing our organization and the proposed solutions to these challenges, like the Sustainable Development Agenda, climate change, migration, gender equality and the empowerment of women, transparency, reform of the United Nations, multilateralism, and others. I would like to clarify the situation and position of my country in relation to some of the information contained in the report. My delegation welcomes the report and the information contained therein on counterterrorism in order for us to achieve the aspired goal and step up the efforts made to address the root causes conducive to the recruitment of terrorists and the spread of the scourge of terrorism. However, we hope if the authors of the report would have taken the trouble in referring to Syria, not only Iraq, when they mentioned Daesh. Because, as it is known to all of you, Daesh and other terrorist groups are present in Syria as well. We expected that the war we, alongside our allies against terrorism, would have garnered support of the international community at large within the international legitimacy and UN resolutions on counterterrorism through the use of necessary tools to deter the countries known for supporting, funding, and arming terrorists and sending them to Syria, those who are called by others at times moderate opposition and armed opposition at others, and jihadists at other times, and non-state groups in other circumstances. However, they deliberately ignore to call them terrorists. Syria, unfortunately, has been transformed by others into a destination to terrorists, like the notorious organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières, Murderers Without Borders, Killers Without Borders. So now terrorism is without borders. This is to make it hard to arrest them. The experience of my country, Syria, in fighting terrorism in cooperation with its allies should have been mentioned in the report of the Secretary General. However, the authors ignored this, unfortunately. The authors have also not mentioned the aggression and the foreign presence on the territories of some member countries in the UN without their consent. The pretexts are now exposed, like those countries possess weapons of mass destruction that are not existing in the first place, or the pretext of protecting the civilians, or to establish the false democracy in these countries. We hoped if the authors would have mentioned this foreign presence, at least as a legal presence and as a grave breach to international law, the UN Charter, and it is an attack on the sovereignty and threat to international peace and security. Of course, we refer here to the military presence, the illegal military presence of the US, France, and the UK on the territories of my country, and the presence of some other countries which claim to be members in a coalition that impose their presence in my country without my country has sought for the help of this coalition. The report missed making a reference to the Israeli occupation to Palestine and the Syrian Golan and other territories, occupied territories, and we hoped if the authors have used the word occupation and not the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This is the phrase used in the report, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because the word occupation is the right legal UN word to be used here, according to UN resolutions and documents, as well as the resolutions of this General Assembly since its establishment. All UN resolutions mention the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories and Arab territories. Occupation and not conflict. My country condemns once again the use of weapons of mass destruction, and we hoped if the authors of the report have refrained from ignoring the Israeli arsenal of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, particularly due to the fact that Israel is the only party that possesses nuclear weapons in the Middle East. It is the only party that refuses to join the NPT. It refuses to subject its facilities to the special guarantee regime of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Despite all that, the Israeli scandals, the report failed to mention the Israeli arsenal of weapons of mass destruction. The authors also missed referring to the unilateral coercive measures imposed on a number of member states, including my country, Syria. The measures imposed by the United States, the European Union, and others. We hoped if the authors would have touched on the importance of lifting these measures, the imposition of which contravenes with provisions of international law, the UN Charter, the General Assembly resolutions, and all the calls to implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. How can we call for achieving development and welfare to all peoples, including the people of Syria, while some member states at the same time impose sanctions on these countries, which contributes to the continuation of the suffering of those peoples and make them behind? My delegation rejects in the strongest terms the content of paragraph 112 in the report on the so-called IIIM, the International Impartial Independent Mechanism. As you know, it is not a mechanism, it's not international, it's not impartial, it's not independent. You all know our position vis-à-vis this mechanism. We reject it. It has been established by virtue of an illegal, non-consensual resolution full of political and legal flaws. We have stated them in details in many letters, the last of which was the one we addressed to the President of the General Assembly, which has been issued recently in document A/72/106. We stressed in this letter that the content of this letter does not constitute a recognition of this mechanism. It does not constitute an acceptance of its work or mandate, taking into consideration that the politicized, biased resolution establishing this mechanism was put forward by countries that have anti-Syria agenda. In addition to the fact that this is a serious precedent in the history of the General Assembly, which does not have, in the first place, the mandate to establish such mechanism. in light of the fact that this mechanism would constitute a flagrant interference in the internal affairs of my country by some countries which have been exporting terrorism to my country over 8 years. It is a serious violation of the principles of the Charter of the UN, particularly Article 12, and the international law as well. Does anybody doubt today that 101 countries, member states in this organization export terrorism to my country? They have been doing that over 8 years. This is according to a Security Council report. It's not my own word. Does anybody believe that 101 states have been exporting terrorism to my country over 8 years? Does anybody would believe that this is impartial, independent kind of action? I leave the answer to you. In conclusion, the government of my country, Syria, stresses once again that it will make all efforts to cooperate with His Excellency, the Secretary General of the UN, in full respect of the Charter and international legitimacy and international law. We have known His Excellency and worked with him when he was the High Commissioner for Refugees. This cooperation produced positive results back then, particularly that this cooperation has taken place during and after the US-UK aggression on Iraq in 2003. We hope our cooperation with the Secretary General would continue as while he is the head of the organization. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguido representante de la
I thank the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for that